Hello, everyone.
Oh my God.
We're gonna get started. Hello. Thank you all for coming out here tonight. I'm Belle. I'm on the events team here at Books of Magic. We are so thrilled to have Crystal, Hana Kim, and Julia Phillips with us tonight to celebrate the incredible novel, The Stone Home, in collaboration with the Asian American Writers Workshop. But before we get started, I want to point out some logistics for tonight's event. The first thing is just the restroom is this door right here next to the Moleskins in case you need it. We're going to be doing a hand-raised Q&A after the talk, so start thinking of questions to ask now. And then after, Crystal will be signing and personalizing books at the table next to where you checked in, and after we'll let you know where to line up, not sign up. If you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of The Stone Home online using the link in the description. Okay, so we love this book so much here at Books for Magic, and we completely agree with Minjin Lee when she says it is a privilege to read Crystal Hana Kim's fiction, which both edifies and enlightens. This stunning novel will stay with you long after you turn the final page, and we're so lucky to have Crystal here with us tonight. So Crystal Hana Kim is the author of If You Leave Me, which was named a Best Book of 2018 by over a dozen publications. Kim is the recipient of the 2022 National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35 Award and is the 2017 Penn Robert J. Dow Short Story Prize winner. Currently, she is the visiting assistant professor at Queens College. She lives in Brooklyn, New York with her family. And as I mentioned earlier, the incredible Julia Phillips joins Crystal in conversation tonight. Julia is the best-selling author of the novel Disappearing Earth, which was a finalist for the National Book Award and one of the New York Times Book Review's 10 Best Books of the Year. Her second novel, Bear, which we're so excited for, will be published in June. So without any further delay, please join me in welcoming Crystal and Julia.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Books Are Magic. Thank you to the Asian American Writers Workshop, and thank you, Julia. Yay.
Thank you, Crystal. Yeah.
I'm so excited. And thank you all, seriously, for coming. I said this at first, after my first launch, but it feels like a wedding because you have all these people from different parts of your life. You know, I have my students, my writing friends, parent friends, to be gender inclusive. It's just like so fun to see you all, and I so appreciate it. I'm going to just read a little bit from the beginning of the novel to give you a little taste. And all you need to know is that it's set in 2011. It's nearly noon, and I'm sweltering in bed when the doorbell rings. I twist to the window, a crowd of buildings, wind ruffling the Shincheon River, turning white peaks. The same image I've seen for years, and yet a foreboding pecks at me until I'm upright, thrashing in my sheets. I'm not expecting anyone. I peer through the peephole to a stranger's bowed head, tall and standing too close, blocking most of my vision. Yes, I ask, voice raised. You don't know me. She keeps her head bent, so the words come out muffled. I was told to come here. I don't want whatever you're selling, I say. I told the community center I'm not interested. I open the door a few centimeters, enough to yell straight into her face. Then there, in her hands, a knife. She raises it between us, and fear hisses through me. Can I come in? A smile, glinting and harsh, all teeth. That matte blade. You recognize it, don't you? She asks. I flatten myself against the frame, and she brushes past, slips off her heels, and lines them up at the entryway as if she were a summoned guest. This woman walks on, barefoot. The knife held loose absorbs the light as she passes my living room. Is there somewhere we can sit? She turns, the knife now an offering in her palm, lusterless, that serrated edge like rotten teeth, that smooth black handle. I rub my ear. This knife from my youth, now here in my home? No. It is a trick, a coincidence. I shake the possibility from me, and yet I close the door and follow her in. The kitchen straight ahead, I say. She surveys the scoured countertops, the kettle on the stove, by the window a round table with 2 wooden seats, as if I've been waiting for her all these years. She pulls back a chair. Can I have some tea? She asks. We are moving too quickly. Here is this woman, 30-something, well-fed, tall, clearly a Kyoko from America, though her Korean is nearly unaccented. A woman I've never seen before, yet a vibration bells through me. I need caffeine, she says. She taps the knife's handle. I don't drink coffee. I rush to the cupboards, steady my hands against the knobs, boil water, pull tins, breathe through a new hurt in my ribs. I try to swipe glances at her face, quiet this rattling in my veins. She scans the room as she sits, a plastic bowl cupping popped tangerines. Yellow canary blooms in a glass jar on the windowsill, bare white walls, markers of my paltry existence. You're not scared, she says, and I can't tell if it's a question. I know how to use that better than you, I say, unable to help myself, to resist claiming the knife as mine. She nods, and a smoky hope spreads through me. Is it her? I bring the kettle, 2 cups with built-in strainers and the tins of tea over on a wooden tray. She sifts through pine, green, black chrysanthemum, her head bent, not meeting my gaze. She chooses black. I pluck pine needles, and we spoon leaves into our strainers, sink them into our cups. The stereo, I realize, has stopped. I've been listening to ocean sounds, but there's a sticky silence now, though perhaps that's the air curdled with humidity. She lays the knife between us. Well, do you recognize me? Rustles her shoulders and raises her neck, as if she's been waiting for this moment to reveal herself. A full, slightly alien face, the skin too elastic, her cheekbones angled and pronounced, a voluptuous mouth, a straight nose with a raised tip so her nostrils show 2 dark circles. I suck in a breath, the hope a heaving in my chest now, grit on my teeth. I think my father died last week, she says. I arrived here this morning from New York. She picks at her loose linen dress, the color of blood. I should be wearing black. Part of me still in denial. She pulls a strainer from her mug and sets it straight on the tray. Tainted water seeps from tiny holes, flows around the tins, the kettle, into the whirled grain. She breaks, gasping. A metal watch slides down her wrist as she covers her face, and suddenly I understand. The man who raised her. He is the reason why she's here. The wrecked movement of her loose limbs. Her father is dead, and I don't know what he's told her. She doesn't know I have imagined her all these years. I never thought I'd see her again. I'll stop there. The people in the back, you should come sit so you don't have to stand.
Yes, there's seats right here up in front. That was such a pleasure, Crystal, to hear. I
Thank
feel
you.
like a stranger at the door, a knife, a mystery. What could be better? I just am so excited and so thankful that everyone is here right now. It is, Crystal, congratulations on your brilliant and beautiful second novel. Huge accomplishment. I think it's an honor for us all to be here at this launch, and I'm including the folks on the live stream. So I wonder if we could just give Crystal one more round of applause. So just so everyone knows what to expect this evening, we're going to talk together for about half an hour, and then Crystal will take a picture of pictures. Take pictures and we'll be done. No. So I have a big question for you, Crystal, which is, okay, Stone Home's been out for like 48 hours now.
Yeah.
How are you feeling? How are you doing? How has this momentous week been for you?
I'm feeling really good. This is like the most exciting part, I think, seeing people I love. The book came out on Tuesday, and I brought my kids to the bookstore and showed it to them. That was really sweet. And then I've just been getting, messages from people who are starting to read it. But yesterday the weather was disgusting, so I didn't go out to see it in bookstores. So this is, this feels like the true celebration.
This is true, but also I feel like writing is so solitary that maybe being inside for 24 hours while it rains is also a perfect writerly celebration. Just alone. If you had a cat, maybe that would be ideal. Yeah. Not for both three. Crystal, will you tell us how the Stone Home came to be? So what inspired this book and what sort of brought it along the road to put it in our hands?
Oh, it took a long time.
How long is a long, long time?
I would say the idea started in 2016.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was 8 years ago. It took me a second. 8 years ago.
We're not mathematicians.
Yeah. Well, so in 2016, I read an Associated Press article about these reformatory institutions in South Korea that were created in 1980, which is recent history, right? And these institutions were created so that the South Korean government could secretly clean up their image because they were trying to win the bid for the 1988 Olympics. And there were all these accompanying photographs of these kids that were being corralled into trucks who had no idea what was awaiting them in these institutions. There were photos of girls in these sweatshirts working bent over sewing machines. And I just couldn't stop thinking about these kids whose lives were abruptly cut off in this way, who were forced into these institutions, who didn't know when they would be able to leave. And in that moment, I didn't think I was going to write a novel about it. I had kind of like famously told my friends that my next book was not going to require any research. I need a break. But I couldn't stop thinking about these kids in the photos. And then I also started thinking about how these institutions happen time and again across cultures, across countries, and I started questioning, why does this sort of oppression happen over and over again? How are we not learning from the past? And so I started writing about it. Really, I wasn't sure if it would be a book, just kind of writing about it because that's how I figure out questions and untangle them. And then in 2018, I was visiting some family in Korea, and I actually met one of the survivors of one of the institutions called the Brothers Home, and we
How'd you come to meet him?
I started just emailing as many people as I could, a lot of dead ends. I don't even remember how I found his information. I think it was like on Facebook. I found an email, and then I emailed him, and he agreed to meet with me. He was living in a hut outside the Seoul National Assembly because he was protesting the government and he said, I'm going to live in this hut until you acknowledge your oppression of us. And so we met, we talked for a day, and something about that conversation, I think, solidified in me, okay, I'm writing this book. This is what I'm going to devote the many years to come to this subject.
I really love that you went back on your word to your friends and did in fact do another research. Because to me you were in my own mind, I don't know if anyone else shares this notoriety of Crystal, in my own mind, like a notoriously extraordinary researcher. I have a quote of you to yourself. So about your first novel, you said, research is my constant companion. I need to read text, pore over images, listen to oral testimonies, and interview family members. All this work is integral to the bookmaking process. And already you've talked about, looking at news articles, looking at photographs, speaking firsthand to the survivor. I wonder if the research process or the well you went into was different this time around than last time, or if it was sort of returning to those well-used muscles that you had for If You Leave Me. What was it like?
I love that you found that. Thank you.
I had to go into like Google Cache because
well, so I say that I don't like research, but I think I must. I must, and I think I don't want to admit it. My third book, which I'm working on now, it's a little more contemporary, but there's still research, just like because of the topic that I'm interested in. So I think I do enjoy it. I think it's like a love-hate relationship because it takes so much time, but it creates like a solid foundation for me.
Yeah, and a lot of depth. Your books are extraordinarily rich and layered and robust and real, and I think they achieve a kind of texture that fiction really rarely achieves. It's extraordinary. You're a very brilliant person. This is a question, zooming out for a second from the Stone Home, but just thinking about what you said. Why, when do we learn from our past? Why don't we learn from our past? And then thinking about the next book you're working on, moving more contemporary, but perhaps not yet. I'm curious about your relationship to time and the past. And your first book was set over quite a long period of time, but starting in the 40s?
1950, but it spanned 16 years.
Spanned 16 years. And then this book is 1980 to 2011?
Well,
In a way?
so yes, in a way, yeah.
But to give us the...
So the novel begins in 2011 with this woman arriving with a knife.
This mysterious woman, you have to read.
Yeah, you'll find out.
I hear the best way to find out is to get like 3 or 4 copies of the book and lay them out in front of you and then look at it.
So the novel begins in 2011, but the appearance of this woman forces our narrator, Unju, to think back to her past, to 1980, this one year when she was forced into an institution, a reformatory center. So the bulk of the novel takes place in 1980 and is actually the story of her as well as this boy named Sangchar, who is the father of that woman. So the bulk of the novel is in 1980, but I needed the 2011 sections to provide a wider lens and to provide some information about the political landscape for us. And I found Nare, the 2011 mysterious woman with a knife. I found that she was an entry point for us into the book.
When you think about choosing your time period, or do you think about sort of a most accessible entry point? Do you go by your gut? Do you go by your head? How do you pick these times?
Gut. And it takes forever because I'm kind of just, when I'm writing, I come up with a question I'm interested in, and I think for this one of the main questions was trying to understand the limits of humanity, trying to understand how the oppressed can become oppressors, trying to understand the ways in which people survive and how hope and community is so integral to survival. So I come up with these kind of questions and themes, and then I write my way around into these corners, and I have to backtrack and I have to toss these pages, and it takes forever until I somehow form a book.
Okay, I'm so curious actually about that winding path and that forever, and then eventually forming the book. Yes. I know I've had the good luck of getting to see you at different moments in this process. And you didn't always have these 2 chief narrators, right? You kind of had different forms and different shapes. So I was wondering if you could kind of guide us through this winding road you took.
Yes. So the narrator, her name is Unju. She's the one who opens the door to that mysterious woman with a knife. She's the one who tells us the story of how she and her mother were forced into an institution. And she's the heart of the novel, I would say. In my first draft, she didn't exist, which is to me wild because I'm so grateful that I found her. But she didn't exist in the first draft. In the beginning, I thought it was going to be a father-daughter story. So it was a boy in 1980 in the reformatory center, and then it was this Korean American woman wandering around Brooklyn, aimlessly trying to figure out more about her father, who was kind of mysterious and estranged from her. And the thing is, I knew I needed a character that was outside of the institution to show us the political reverberations, to show us the generational impacts. I knew I needed her. But I think, again, subconsciously, I think I knew she was not the right person, but I just kept going and I wrote so many pages from her perspective because I didn't know what else to do.
I really get it.
Do you ever do that?
I have definitely had characters that wander around Brooklyn aimlessly.
Yes! Your narrative is boring, but I just didn't know what else to do. And then I was at an artist residency in Wyoming. It was snowing, I was in a cabin, and I was writing a scene from that girl, Nade. Nade's perspective, and in that scene, she is looking at photographs of her father's youth, and she finds a photograph from the reformatory center, and there's a group of kids, and there's a girl there in the scene, or in the photograph. And I'm writing this, right? Making it up as I go. And Nade looks at the photograph and looks at the girl who's scowling and wonders, who is that girl? And while I'm writing that, I'm starting to think, who is that girl? Like, why is she scowling? And she just came to me so formed, like I could already tell, like, she's feisty, she's a little spiky, like she's got this like strong personality. And I started wondering, like, well, how did she end up in the institution? What is she doing there? What's her story? And I couldn't stop thinking about this random girl in a photograph. And then at some point I realized, oh, she's the narrator. I need to now toss a bunch of pages, like 80 pages, relegate Netta to the frame, and then, write from this girl's perspective. And it sounds shitty. I don't know if I want to say that on YouTube, but and it kind of is because, you have like 80, 90 pages that you have to toss, but also was such a relief because I just realized, like, this is her.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for her, and now she's here.
Not to talk about puking on the live stream, but I feel like it is like you feel the tension building where you're like, something has to be fixed, like something's not right, and then you throw out those pages and you're good to go. You rally and you.
I got this.
That's so interesting to me that it started as a father-daughter book, because I think of it now as a mother-daughter book and as a brother book, about these family relationships, but not that particular family relationship. So this heart of the story came in and also completely reframed and refocused that what the story was about, which is incredible. Thinking about, of course, I have to ask you about motherhood and its impact on this book, because the first section I ever heard you read from the Stone Home, Crystal came as a visitor to the Randolph MFA program, which has there's some Randolph folks here right now, and she read this section of the book that involves a birth, and it was like the most intense thing. We were all basically having contractions. It was this rhythmic, I've never heard labor put down on the page that way. It was extraordinary, and everyone in the room, no matter their experience they've had, like no matter their gender or a child or not, everyone was like, I'm having a baby. I wanted to ask you about that sort of entry point into motherhood and that kind of family bond as portrayed in this book. You became a parent in the course of the writing of this book, and did you find that impacted the work? Did you find you were already thinking about how did your life shape the book?
I think I've always been really interested in mother-daughter stories because I'm both. But when I first started this, I was just a daughter. But I think it's so complex and it's so fraught and there's so many competing emotions. And mother-daughter narratives were so integral to If You Leave Me, my first book. So I think when I started my second book, I thought, I want to do something different. I want to push myself to explore different dynamics, which is why I thought it would be a father-daughter story. But the thing is, you can't force the writing, and I think I'm just going to always be interested in mother-daughter stories. And so I had to kind of let the writing lead me to where the story would be best. And that meant that there would be a lot of tensions between Anju and her mother in this book, who they're forced into the institution together. And I became a mother twice over while writing this book. And I had always kind of thought of mother-daughter stories from the perspective of the daughter, right? And all the kind of begrudging feelings you have as a daughter, and the frustrations of wanting more from your parents than perhaps they can give you. And I think now that I am a mother, I'm seeing it from the other side as well, and kind of grieving this idea that we are all from somebody, right? I feel like we would never really understand our parents perhaps the way they want to be understood, and we never think of them in as much depth as they are, right? And that is kind of gutting to me now that I'm a parent. So I wanted to write about that. And then labor, I just think it's so cool. I just think it's really an incredible animal experience, and I honestly, I hesitate to say I loved it, but we've talked about this. It's cool.
I love it.
Yeah, right? It's so
But everyone has different experiences. experiences.
Yeah.
You don't
Oh,
have
yeah.
to.
Okay, that's
yeah,
true.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like, if you wanna,
I think
if you wanna have a freaky deaky conversation, come
Oh,
on
yeah,
over.
you're
You're talking about in depth
Yes.
with photos.
Yes.
I will not show you guys. But it's just like so cool. So I knew I wanted to write that.
I think you capture it in a way that I've never ever experienced anywhere else. I can't imagine I could not imagine anyone capturing it the way that you do. It's extraordinary. I also find it devastating to think about how we don't know our parents, but I guess how we don't know anyone. And I think about you have written now 2 books that go through different people's perspectives, and by doing that, create a kind of richness and wholeness and like a feeling of the whole story that I think a book with just one narrator can't achieve, or just one time can't achieve. And I wonder, how do you think about that construction? What draws you to that shape of storytelling?
Thank you. I love polyphonic novels. I love novels where there are multiple narrators, because 2 people will just experience. You can have 2 people in a room, right? And something happens to them, and they will recount that experience so differently. And I think that's so fascinating, how our past traumas, our past experiences, our past biases, like all of that affects how we view the world. And so I love novels where you can see the same situation from multiple aspects, because I like that, playing with that multifaceted lens. And I think it provides a wholeness to the narrative, or a richness, or like a depth that perhaps you cannot achieve with just one narrator. So it's just something that I'm drawn to. Again, I kind of considered for a second, do I want to write a novel with just one narrator? At first, I thought about it for maybe a couple of days, but I thought, no, I just really love the multifaceted aspect of polyphonic novels, and I don't want to shy away from that.
I love hearing you, as you talk about the writing process, talk about also like sort of considering the work that you're doing in conversation with the work you've done, and thinking about how your work relates to itself, how your books relate to each other. Obviously this is hot on my mind. We both talked about like what it's like to have a second book coming out, or what it's like to be writing a second book. And I'm wondering if you can kind of step away from, zoom out a little bit from your books and tell me, one data point is just one data point, right? But 2 data points, we can start to plot a line. I wonder if you look at the arc of your creative work, do you see kind of through lines, or what subjects that you want to always come back to, or themes that are ever present for you, and what you see sort of as driving your work ahead?
Oh, I love that question. And I've been thinking about it more, because now this book is coming out, and I didn't intend it for it to be this way, but I do think that when I'm writing, I like to look back on history to understand our present kind of current moral, political climate. So I think that's something that I am always drawn to. I don't know if I'll ever write a novel that's contemporary, as in like set right now in 2024. I don't know how I would deal with like the technology and the phones, and how do you create tension when you can just look something up on the internet? I don't know. For me, I think that's really difficult. But I think what I've realized is that I am creating kind of a lineage with the books. I kind of see my books in conversation with one another, and they're kind of creating a cultural memory that I'm falling ever closer to the present. So for this 3rd book, which I hesitate to say that, because then I bet you I'll go home and it'll all change. But right now, I think it's set like early 2000s, and it's focusing on a Korean American woman in New York. But I don't think I could have written her without having written this book set in 1980, and then the book set in 1950. I had to create that foundation for myself in order to understand this Korean American woman and how she came here. So I think of it as a family.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. The cultural memory. Yeah. Yes, this lineage. Yeah. I've got 2 more questions for you, very quick, and then I want to open it up to everybody, because I'm sure you're all chomping at the bit. I hope you've been preparing your questions this whole time. So here are my two questions. One is, as mentioned, this is a book we're going to remember after we close the last page, and I wonder if you have a vision or a hope for what people remember, what people take away from it. Like when we rip through the book, we close we walk away, what do you want us to walk away with?
I think that's such a good question. And to kind of distill it to one thing is hard. I think something that I learned myself in writing this book, and that perhaps I hope readers will take away from the book, is just the kind of resilience and strength in humans, and the way that we find community and create collective care in order to survive. That's something that I learned in the writing of this book, in the research of this book, and it's something that gives me hope during a time where there's so much to be horrified by in the news, right? And it's so easy to look away because it's an onslaught, right? And it's sometimes we want to protect ourselves and we look away. But I think if we remember the importance of hope and community, that can buoy us and that can help us to act.
I'm finding that very moving to think about that in the presence of your community. You know, like here we are at this wedding, this book wedding. Okay, one more question, and then it's over to the community, which is that here we are in this bookstore. Obviously, everyone's going to get like 50 to 60 copies of your book, and if you leave me as well. But do you have other titles that you would recommend to us? Maybe some like 2024 folks. I know there's some 2024 folks sitting in the audience right now.
Yes.
Like, do you have books that you recommend to us?
Well, there's this incredible book that I read that is about two sisters and a bear. And it's called It's called Bear by Julia Phillips.
Unfortunately disqualified. You can't get that.
So you can pre-order it. I think you can pre-order it here. And what are the 2024 books? Green Frog by Gina Chang. The Storm We Made by Vanessa Chan. There's some other incredible books.
Tamim, do you want to give a shout
Oh,
out?
Tamim!
Well, I'm shouting out my own book. City of Laughter.
There's just so many incredible books here.
It's like brilliant people that we can get. I think if you pick up those books right now, you might be able to ask for a signature.
Oh yes,
folks if they agree, if they deign to sign.
And Andy, right? I'm sorry, your novel is out right now, right?
It's not.
It's not out.
Yeah.
But what is it? The Cinema?
It's Cinema Lab.
Cinema Love. Cinema Love.
1 month.
And it's coming out. When is it?
May 7th.
May 7th. And you probably pre-ordered that too.
Got to pre-order everything. It's gonna be tough, but you come to a book launch to spend like
Hundreds of
$400 to
dollars.
thousands of dollars. What else are you here for? If not that. This is how you have a good Thursday night.
2024 is just like such a great book. Such a great year.
Yes, it is a book.
Yeah, it is a great book.
I want to open up to everybody, and I'm sure you have lots of questions for Crystal. Where'd she get that dress? How does it match so well with the cover? I've got questions from folks.
I love this book, as you know. It is often very difficult and very wrenching, and I want to ask you how you nourish yourself with other arts or other practices while you are working on such difficult material.
This is a beautiful question. I'm going to repeat it for the live stream. Just how you take care of yourself when you're working on such difficult and wrenching material.
Thank you so much. You know I love your work, so that really means a lot to me. I think having children, even though they're exhausting and I don't get to sleep as much and I look like 1,000 years older than 3 kids.
I saw that a lot of the time.
Yeah. But I do think that they are like a source of hope and joy. You know, the wonder that they see. You know, my kids get so excited about throwing a ball around in the living room. That is just really incredible. Finding literary community and people you can talk to about writing. And I do dabble in ceramics, like having some other sort of creative act, especially if it requires your hands and requires you to be away from technology, I think helps me. Thank you for that question.
Crystal, you asked me this in my book launch, but what books do you consider ancestors or like a lineage, have a lineage to your book?
What are the books that are ancestors of your book? I love it.
And I did ask that question, right? Now I realize it's a hard question. I think Donmi Choi's DMC Colony, it's a poetry collection that I really loved. Human Acts by Han Gang, which is translated from Korean. I think Paradise by Toni Morrison. You know, it's a collective of women in one space. Those are some I would say. Thank you.
We're gonna add those to the stack. We have to add those to the stack. Gina, did I see your hand before?
Yes. Congratulations, Crystal. You've written these two beautiful books about very difficult, dark times in the history of Korea, which is another land that we share. And I wanted to ask you how excavating those histories, since you spoke about research, and learning more about these time periods, which I did not know about the history that's explored in the Stone Home. How do you feel like knowing that history now and writing about it, how has that sort of changed you, both as a writer and as a human being?
Yeah, how has writing these books about moments of Korea's history changed you as a writer and as a human being?
That is such a beautiful question. Thank you. I think being a part of the diaspora, being born here, and having parents that are from Korea, there's always been kind of these big gaps in our understanding of each other that was really frustrating for both of us, you know, for us to navigate, because sometimes the way that I view the world is just so different from my parents, and we just cannot understand each other. And I think that for me, doing this work, putting myself into these narratives, into these moments in culture and history, helps me to kind of navigate those gaps better. I wouldn't say it fills in the gaps, but it just helps create these little bridges for me to have perhaps more empathy and understanding for where my parents and my ancestors come from and why they are the way they are. And I think that then broadens out and helps me to kind of have a more empathetic view of humanity in general. Thank you.
Hi, congratulations, Crystal. You have always been an artist first and foremost, but you're also a wonderful teacher, and it sounds like you have students here. And I'm curious, in all the different kind of iterations of your teaching life, you're giving a lot, and probably like protecting boundaries is important for your work. So how do you protect boundaries, but also how does teaching enrich a project or enrich sort of your writing life?
How does teaching enrich your writing life, and how do you protect your boundaries as a teacher as well?
I love teaching, and I was actually a teacher first. I was always writing, but before I went to grad school for writing, I was a teacher, and I find it to be so rewarding, and especially when I'm teaching creative writing, the excitement and the hope and the passion there can be really rejuvenating, because I think sometimes as published writers we can get in our heads, right, about the publishing aspect, and so there's something like really pure about the way that writing students approach the work that can be really rejuvenating. And then the boundaries, I don't know I'm not sure how I do this boundaries with my students, because it is really exhausting, but I think it's like very symbiotic, is that the right term? And so I think I learn so much from my students too, and I learn from what I teach them reminds me of truths in writing and in the creative act that I kind of forget sometimes. So I think maybe there's just a symbiosis happening that helps with boundaries. Thank you for that question.
I have a question about your research process, because I really admire how you like weave in historical details, but it never feels like too much. How do you go about like balancing that, like, and then also in terms of process itself, do you research to a certain extent first, and how do you know you have enough material to start writing and avoid like going down a research hole?
how do you research? How do you avoid going down a research hole? How do you weave in details from research that doesn't feel like, it never feels didactic, it never feels like too much? How do you do it?
Thank you. No, I really don't like it when novels just personally feel didactic or feel like a history lesson. So I think the way that I do it is I really focus on the character and I focus on how they are viewing the world and what they would experience. So a lot of like sensory details, a lot of image and smells and tastes. That helps me to make it feel real while without feeling like 1980 this happened. And as I think that I think there's a crutch with research, procrastinating. So I think it's for me really important to research in tandem with the writing. You know, research and write at the same time, and then where you can say while I'm writing, if there's something that I need to look up, I'll make a little comment and I'll look it up later. But if I said, oh, I'm gonna just research until I'm ready, then I'll never write the book. So I need to do it in tandem, and that way, what the characters need and the kind of obstacles the characters experience is what motivates my research too. So I'm not doing kind of like extraneous research, I guess.
Congratulations. I was wondering if there's a scene, if I don't know, that maybe was your favorite or most difficult, or like that was meant the most to you when writing the book.
I love that. Yes, the scene that meant the most to you while writing.
The labor scene. So much fun to write. And to be honest, it was like very inspired,
Spoiler free.
by my own experiences. So just to kind of like think about that time and kind of like the state you get into. It's like very animal and kind of like almost like meditative, not but in like a horribly painful way.
I was so not to go on about this later scene, but I was really impressed that you were being outside and observing, because I feel like the state that you're in, it's like so unobserved. You're like just like totally tripping balls and have no perception of what's going on. But you are like you're channeling that tripping balls vibe.
Yes.
Like you're seeing what's happening. It's so cool.
Because I felt like I need to write about this because it's so interesting to me and I want to show the power in labor. I bet you there's so many people in this audience right now who are like, what the hell are you talking about? And that's, everybody has their own experiences, but I think that is cool. So I would say that was a really cool scene for me to write. And then I did really enjoy the end, but I can't tell you. And I would say maybe enjoy is the wrong word because it's pretty intense. But there's a sense of like momentum, I guess, that kept me going.
Yes. Yeah. Do we have time for, what do you think, one more question? Does anyone have our kicker to take us out? There's a lot of pressure, huh? There's a lot of pressure, I was just saying. No kidding. No pressure, no pressure.
It's a question. About how you have these like big thematic ideas that can drive a project, and a little bit about how the text is fluid, like, and if you're writing 90 pages, do you ever find that the fluidity goes the other way? Like you'll write something that you get really excited about, but it's not the question you're exploring, and so you change the question and not the text.
So do I ever get so excited by the writing that I change the focus of the novel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so, and I think maybe in one of the examples is, I kind of began thinking that I want to do the father-daughter narrative, but then this girl in the photograph intrigued me so much that I decided to kind of relegate the father-daughter narrative to the margins and then focused on this other person that seemed more intriguing to me. I don't know, does that answer your question?
I have a question on the heels of your question. But I don't want to interrupt your question. When you were talking about the moment, the photograph before, you said like, as a joke, you were like, here I am like making this all up, but like it like comes to me. Like, I was wondering, like, do you feel that way? Of course you're making it all up, but also like something's happening that is beyond
you can't control.
That you can't control. Yeah. And it's not coming from it's channeling through you.
Yes.
And do you feel like the story comes from somewhere else? Like how do you I was wondering if you feel like you're making it all up or if it's Or
No,
just
I
somewhere
do
else?
think that when it feels right, it does feel like you're channeling something, like you're in this like momentum and this like there's a propulsion to it. And that's what I meant when I was writing this other section that I threw away. I was just like trudging along and I was like, this is not right, but I don't know what to do. But then once I found Unju, then it really, I saw her, I knew what her personality would be like. I didn't know exactly the plot, but I knew her voice. And then it was much easier in a way because I think the creative acts were flowing.
I love that you follow that, and then we'll follow that. We'll follow that too as readers, like wherever you go.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal, and thank all of you.
Alright, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you to Julia for moderating. Thank you to Crystal for celebrating this amazing book with us. A few final reminders. So if you're still with us on the live stream, please purchase a copy of the book in the description. And then for all of us here, we will have additional copies for sale as well as Julia's novel as well. So please go buy some of those. It's at the table where you checked in. And then my coworkers are going to point to where Crystal will be signing and personalizing. So we're going to have you line up down the center aisle here towards the left, and we'll kind of begin shortly. And that is pretty much it. Thank you so much again. And yay, congratulations!
I was inspired because I went to Lisa Koseman and she did this and she's like, I don't know.